Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Barriers and Boundaries Resilience Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, EB, and you know I'm going to be talking about healthy employees creating healthy organizations. And we had a chance to do just that today with strategist Dr. Rob Leone. He has a wealth of experience in teaching as a professor, consulting, and just a plethora of information out there on him. All the notes will be added in the show notes, but a very exciting conversation, a very insightful conversation. And it was just a great opportunity for us to discuss a number of things involved in building resilience into an organization, namely culture and planning. And let's just get into it. You're going to hear more about it in the conversation. But again, please check out the links, check his organization out. And I think you're going to be really blessed by this conversation. We have a special guest with us today, Dr. Rob Leone, not Lion, spelled Lion, but it is Leone. And Rob, thank you for being here. Just a little bit what I know about your background, PhD, professor in human resource development, a lot of organizational psychology, behavior. It seems like you really just want to help organizations, leaders get the most out of their employees and just a really good environment for their employees. Is that a safe assumption
That's
there?
excellent. That's excellent. Have you been eavesdropping in our workshops? We do a thing that our mission as a part of our introductions with teams. The last ones, what's your meaning? And you nailed it right there. That's how I see it. So good job.
Mm. Oh, nice. And we've had, a few emails back and forth, and I really kind of been trying to peel back, this onion, or, I don't know if it's stinky, but just this organizational culture of, what does it really mean to connect in the workplace? And
Mhm.
I see the job as a leader is just removing some of those barriers to growth. And I was really attracted to a lot of the work that I've seen you've done, and kind of reading up, listening to a lot of stuff as well. And this idea of organizational resilience that we kind of briefly touched on around planning, effective
Mhm.
planning. I'd really love to hear some of your thoughts on that as we kind of get started here.
Okay, awesome.
Mm.
Well, thanks for having me, Evie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been doing this for many years, and over the years it's evolved, and this organizational planning aspect has always been central to what I do. I'm a strategist by design. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have a strategy on how I was going to get to this point of the day, and that's been my life story. I haven't really considered myself very gifted, but very skilled at keeping myself on track and
Mm.
having a strategy. So I've always been concerned with how organizations behave and perform. But
Mm.
what I realized
Yes.
after getting my PhD is that we focus so much on the outcomes and creating the outcomes. We didn't focus on any of the behavioral elements to it. And what I noticed was I was designing these great interventions and solutions, but they weren't sticking. And so I
Mm.
wanted to investigate that further. And I shifted my lines of research and I dove deeper into the psychology of work and behavior because what I realized was that was the missing component. That was the glue. And if we don't understand to some extent what makes people tick, or how they behave or
Mm.
where what they need, and a lot of it comes back to needs. It's difficult to get them to do anything, right? It's
Yeah.
not like what we do with our dog and get the treat out and he follows you around and sits and stuff. People are complicated,
Mm.
and they flex that complication many times a day as it relates to emotions, events, things like that. So yeah, so uh, baking resilience into your organization is an important part of making sure that we could ensure that we're going to remain on target for hitting our goals for whatever that might be.
Mm.
And
Do
so,
you,
uh, go ahead. Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
do you, is there like an emphasis on like immediate, intermediate, ultimate? Is that sort of the strategy behind some of the planning? Is that kind of the thought process and some of that?
Sure. So let's back that up just a little bit. So when I
Okay.
work with organizations in terms of strategic planning and strategy, one of the things we need to determine is readiness, right? And a huge consideration is resource or our resources. And when we talk about resources, we're talking about all sorts of things, just not money, but time, energy, attention, things like that, because that is what's going to play into that decision, right? So a lot of organizations really struggle with strategy or strategic planning, especially small or medium-sized organizations, because they're super ambitious, which is awesome. But every time you stack in a strategy, you're kind of taking something off the plate, or you're adding to the plate. And a lot of times we're not taking anything off the plate. We're just trying to say, hey, look, you've already been doing 40 hours of work a week. You're doing it
Mhm.
good, or you need to do it better. But now we need to add on this other component to it. And so that's really difficult for people to digest. In a planning session, it sounds awesome. It sounds awesome for a couple different reasons, because the leaders are there and it's super ambitious, and they're in this like removed time where they're just connecting and talking about these things. But the reality is what happens when that comes back to the workplace, and how is that going to affect the people that's involved with it? And that's where our deep culture work comes in, because if I need to have someone, let's just say you're on my team and I need you to accomplish something, and you don't understand why, you might have a little bit of a resistance towards it.
Sure.
So it's important to me to help explain what that why is, create that alignment. But that's a lot easier said than done, right? Like,
Yeah.
but if I back it up and say, look, we built this cultural base, and you know that I got your back, and everything I'm going to talk about in terms of trying to help move you towards alignment makes much more sense when you have this kind of this feeling, or this buffer of, look, Rob's got my back. I know it's in our best interest. We're in this together. Now take a different organization that doesn't have that, that camaraderie aspect, that culture aspect. How do we move people, right?
Mm.
And then how does it, when it comes up to times getting really tough, so resilience, where we're trying to leverage resilience both organizationally and individually, what tools do we have to do that? And people turn to people that are important to them to work through things, oftentimes as it relates to resilience,
Hmm.
whether that's a sounding board, to vent, for counsel, for support. And and what we if we're not purposeful enough, they're going to turn out, as opposed to engage with the leadership, engage with the team, or they're going to, fraction off a little group that's their sounding board, that might not necessarily be the healthy way to deal with the obstacles and the challenges right now. So
Hmm.
it really speaks to the importance of really getting to know your people, connecting with them, and building that rapport with them.
Is that cultural when you see cultural resistance, is that a common challenge that you see leaders deal with? And some of that, just getting that framework started, getting that mindset of like, look, I'm here to help,
Yeah.
but it's going to take all of us.
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about is culture is going to happen regardless, right? But it's either going to be by design or default.
Mm.
So, right? If we don't put any energy, any effort into it, the culture's still going to emerge. It's just not necessarily going to be the culture we ideally want. And there's a great chance that the downroad effects of that, without purposeful planning, are some negative experiences, problems, or it might be good until it's not, until something happens. So, so we
I
like
like
to
that.
spend time. You go ahead.
Yeah, no, I say I like that. It sounds like that culture is, you want it to be based on expectations and not necessarily just experiences. And
Yeah.
they're just
Well,
building
I'll
on
give you
that. Mhm.
I'll give you a similar concept under a different kind of scope. So work with leaders at times, and they'll say, no, we're good. We're all set. I don't need to do anything else with my team. And what I often remind them, as diplomatic as I can, is that you might be one bad hire away from your whole system falling apart, right?
Mm.
Because we're not, most of us, we're trained in our craft, and then we become leaders, and we got to figure that piece out. And for many of us, there's times when things are just working out, firing on all cylinders, right?
Right.
And the team's getting along, but someone leaves the team, you bring someone else in with your
New
same kind
dynamics.
of
Yeah.
mindset, and everything changes, right? And
Hmm.
so what we're trying to do is build some insulation in the system so
Mm.
that the cultural component pieces that relate to hiring, relate to performance, relate to coaching, leadership, create this insulation for you so that, once again, Evie, you're like, I trust Rob. He's got my back. I know that. And that's what you talk about with the team. The team has a similar framework so that new person coming in is a little uncertain. They're not sure where their alliances are, all these things. And it's the team that brings them in and gets them on board and gets them
Yeah.
fitting into the culture.
And I often see resilience as almost like this arbitrary conversation that's just happening on the side. And
Mhm.
that's why I like some of that work is like, how do we integrate that? And I think it starts with the leader. I think it starts with
Mhm.
being that example and, creating those conditions necessary, for the team to kind of buy into that as well. Is that some of what you've
Yeah.
seen as well?
I think role modeling is huge, right?
Mm,
And so that leader is really in a role model position to some extent. They're looked upon, and they also have a target on them, right? Like,
mhm.
so that when they're
Yep.
good, they could bring the team along, but when they screw up, I know where it came from. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare leaders to understand the impact they have on the other members of the team or the community, however you want to think about that work group,
Mm,
because they carry a lot of weight and influence. And so this is why actually having a level of leadership acumen and self-awareness is important. Um, it's not helpful just to say, do what I say, not what I do, because
mm,
all eyes are on you. And what you also sometimes don't realize is that our non-verbs are sending different messages than our verbal. And I'll give you one example. I was talking with someone about this the other day, and I talk about this constantly in my workshops. So you know the concept RBF
mm,
without its resting bitch face.
mhm,
So
mhm,
so there's certain profiles of people that actually that is their demeanor. That is how they hold their face at rest. And and so I was fortunate that a group. I was leading a retreat, and I was a cluster facilitator among 100 people. I had a pod of 10, and we got to know each other really well over the course of the week. And I thought I was doing a good job as a leader in general outside of that.
mm.
Well, this place was really rich in feedback and opening up and being vulnerable and
Sounds
really aiming
scary.
to improve. Yeah, I know,
It sounds
right?
very scary.
Not for everybody. And one of the students there, because this was at one of my last universities, said, Rob, I want you to know that I'm so appreciative that I got to know you because you're so kind, you have such a warm heart, and you really want to help us. But I'll tell you, seeing you on campus, your face was suggesting otherwise. Like you looked
Oh,
pissed off all the time.
oh my
And
goodness.
and there was and I took that like there's no ego, there's no reaction. I was like, oh my goodness, I took it because I was like, wow, I didn't realize that's what I'm portraying. So think about that as a message. My heart says one thing, but my non-verbs, my body, my physicality says something
Mm.
else, right? And so it could be as small as that, or it could be something really where I am living incongruent with my values and my expectations, and I'm violating them myself, and the other people see it. So it's a whole range of innocentness, but not connecting, all the
Mhm.
way through not leading.
How, I mean, that's brilliant to get that kind of feedback kind of on the spot too, though. I mean, the ability
Yeah,
for that person
it's
to,
hard.
or the trust for that person to come back to you and say, "Hey, look, I see this, but props to that person for being willing
Yeah,
to say that too."
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. And that's what we aspire for, right? We try to work with teams because confrontation's not easy, right? For
yep.
some people it is, but for most people it's not because they don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. They don't want to, but and they also don't want their ego to take a shot at that. But the other side of it is if you really care for your team, or your friends or your significant others or whatever, you need to provide that feedback to let them know if you are moving along together or in different directions. And the
Mm,
failure to have those difficult conversations destroys relationships, whether that's at work or at home. And I could tell you firsthand that I was a late adopter in difficult conversations because I was not raised with that. And it's taken a long time, and there's been a lot of relationship rebuilding and exiting because of that. So it's a huge skill that we need in the workplace because one of the biggest factors we see the lack of accountability in the workplace. And
mm.
so you think about resilience, and that's this dedication to this continuation to say move forward and ride the storm. Now, we're expecting a team of players to do this, team members. Yet, if I'm not holding people accountable for their poor performance and I'm trying to call out the best in these people, how do you think they respond? Well, they start to self-select out. They're like, well, Jim over there's not being held responsible. He's not showing
Hmm.
up on time. He's not putting in the extra hours. So this aspiration of resilience starts to erode because we are inadvertently training people to lower their standard, and then that's too bad because it happens a lot.
Yeah, and I can see that quality of accountability playing that big role in that and just that resilience. So, eh, is that part of the design? I call it like human centric systems that you're kind of
Yeah,
working on. Is that
yeah.
part of what you say is a big engagement piece for you?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Mhm.
It's learning more about people, learning about how people behave, what their need systems are.
Mhm.
Part of what we do is foundational education. So we try to identify common language because language is a real complicated thing. Like you would and I would see the same word, and because of our backgrounds, we would approach it differently. So we try to centralize the language, the vocabulary in organizations. We're not talking about major
Yeah,
significant shifts, but we're learning how to engage with each other, and
sure.
then from there we get into these other things
I
that are skill based, relationship based.
that reminds me, there was an example of that I believe is a good one. Had a boss who, whenever we get new people come in, he would always say, "Welcome to the family." And on one hand, I was like, "Hey, that's great. It's a great concept." On the other hand, I'm like, there's a lot of people who don't have good relationships with family. There's a reason they left their family to move to this city to come to this
Yeah,
organization, and so I'm like, let's use team. Let's
yeah,
and I don't know if that works for you, but that is just when you say language, like it's one of those things that,
yeah.
man,
I
like
push
that's
back. I had the conversation the other day, just like what you said, right? Some people don't like their family. Like I think family is a much more complicated concept. I like the notion of team, like you're talking about. And I played sports, so team makes sense, coach
Mm,
makes sense, and not
mhm,
like this coaching coach like we see on LinkedIn all over the place, like coach.
mhm,
Like I use that mindset. But the other thing that I really spending more time on is community. We're trying to create a community
mm,
because at the end of the day, we're probably more respectful, accepting. We might not agree. We agree to disagree. We're here as a support. And you even think about it. How much time are you spending at work versus at home, right? Your
mhm.
discretionary time at home. Once you get home from your commute, if you're commuting and and you take care of everything that needs to happen, you might only have 1 or 2 hours of your own discretionary time without dealing with kids, hobbies, friends, other things that require your energy to yourself. And so
Yeah,
let's
and community, there's this assumption of roles too. Like I know what role I have in this community. I know
yeah,
what role they have in this community, and I think that helps establish like healthy boundaries too.
yeah,
It's like I'm not going to cross, so I'm not going to try to be the boss when I'm a project manager, or I'm not. It's I think
Yeah.
that helps. I like the community aspect of just the assumptions that are kind of there and built in that I think a leader needs to contribute to as well in their messaging
Yeah.
of the roles, but I think there's that foundational assumption of what we do and don't do in a community.
Yeah. Your
Uh,
your takeaway there is on point when you think about even remote work. If we take it from a community standpoint, not everyone might be afforded the opportunity to work remotely as we're starting to have these callbacks to office. Some people need to be face to face. Some people don't need to be face to face because their work is more private, more maybe research oriented that doesn't require other people to play a part. So
mm.
good point.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of that planning aspect,
Okay.
the effective planning. Can
Yeah.
you kind of share some of your thoughts on how that plays a role in resilience as well?
Sure. So I've always been of the school of thought. I try to flatten my organizations. Organizations are hierarchical in nature, but some are lend themselves more to flatter organization. I'm
Mm,
just talking about it more in terms of minimizing the power differential between leaders and reports. And so you might be in a huge multinational company, so super hierarchical, real lot of power difference among all the levels, but you still have your team. And if you get discretion on how to lead your team, my belief is that we want to shrink in that power differential. And I take the shared leadership approach, right?
mm,
Because I
okay.
want to involve them in those solutions in these projects. It's one thing to just be in charge and you tell everyone what to do. But people want to have a say in what they do. People have a certain level of agency in their life. So
Mm,
why wouldn't they not want it at work? They might need some details and clarification. So it's important to make sure that when we work with teams, in my opinion, we're bringing them to the table for decisions that they can weigh in on. Sometimes we just can't, right? Sometimes it has to
right.
be a decision quick
Sure.
or the buck stops here. But so that's what we try to do is we try to share in the ownership of decision making moving forward. Now I've seen it go wrong where people are too they don't wrap it up well enough as a leader and synthesize the information that's come forward and say, okay, so this is what I've heard. Let's start making that plan. But really,
Okay.
that's what I focus on is how do we do that? How do we bring this out of people in creative ways and fun ways that they get to weigh in. They have a little discretion over the type and quality of work it's going to be that works towards the outcome. And then we take it from there.
Okay. So a good like course of action development type of, I mean, is there like role playing in that? Is it it just kind of
I'm
depends
not.
on the
That is,
organization.
yeah. Like I'll tell you what I did with a group this last week. I've gone
Mm,
through several rounds of building a proposal for them for they need a strategic plan, and
yeah.
what I ultimately wrapped up with was I don't know what the outcome is going to look like because it's your organization, not mine. I have all the tools to get us there, but it's all based on what your people need. And so I will be creative, I'll be flexible, we'll have fun, we'll get certain groups together to collect data, we'll process data in different settings, we'll do all these different things that I see make sense, but I'll
Hmm.
also respond on a whim if you're like, hey, Rob, we're not heading in the direction I want us to go, or I think we have some other problems here, or some people aren't speaking up, so I'll step back, go back to my toolkit, redesign, move forward. And at the end of one of the first calls that led up to the face-to-face meeting to discuss this further, person said, I just want to let you know that everyone else that I've talked to, they had their process and that was it. Like cookie cutter, just do it. And
Hmm.
and then you're done with something. And what you shared is very different, but I really like it. And it speaks to the organic nature of like an organization as well as the people that are involved with it. We're all variables,
Oh, sure.
and so involve people in that process and make it fun and enjoyable. And to some extent, maybe they plan it. Give them the discretion to plan certain aspects of it that you can and work within the space, right? And so it's
Mm,
creativity is a part of it too.
yeah. I like the idea of certain people being variables because there's so much uncertainty, things you can't predict, business environments that are going to shift. Uh, you know, so having that kind of culture, that kind of buy-in,
Yeah.
really having a leader that's taking charge and ensuring that's kind of maintained.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's a major influence on the planning that takes place when you're thinking strategy.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
is
will
there?
share though that like I realize I'm coming from a very specific vantage point where I've been doing this with groups for and teach it and
Mhm,
research it. So I don't expect many leaders just to be able to run with it. But that's also one of the benefits of working with people such as a consultant to help you strengthen your skills, bounce ideas off of, and when you can afford it, let's bring someone in and partner because it'll get
mhm,
us further mileage than us trying to do it ourselves in some instances.
mm,
So I think part of it, what I look to is this the leader being have this thought, this mindset of being a student still. They realize that they know their craft, but they're still green in the leadership realm. They might have great
sure.
experience at some places, but they're not a complete leader at that point, that they're still learning, developing, and
Mhm.
partnering, listening to podcasts like this, reading books, maybe taking a professional development class. All these things factor into moving us along on our journey.
It sounds a lot like parenting as well. When you when you're a kid, well, it's like when you're a kid, you don't realize that your parents are still growing as adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes when you take a job, someone might have just been put in that leadership position. They're still
Yeah.
learning how to be a leader, and like you
Yeah.
don't realize it. You're just like, well, they're the leader. It's their fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you encourage like a balance of like short-term needs versus like long-term goals in terms of
Sure.
in planning in that?
Sure. I was working with a group recently and we were talking about setting goals. And one of the guys said, Rob, I feel like I can't even look ahead. Like I'm working on tasks and my team goals seem so far out. And to his point, that's very true. Sometimes we're just so immersed in it that we can't look off. So rapport is a big one. Once again, I come back to culture. Culture is a
Mm,
big thing because if your people are learning to take care of each other and you have the boundaries and barriers aspects of it, and they understand how to navigate the space and hold each other accountable, it allows the leader to kind of back out from the group. Too many leaders create dependency, in my opinion, and they
mm.
they almost create like hand-holding functions
Yeah,
with
I was going to
with
ask you to
team
expand on
members.
that.
Yeah, like hand-holding functions with team members where they're learning to look, what's next, boss? What's next? Where are we going? How do we do this? What do you want to do next? And there's certain cultural profiles that do that more than others. Um, we want to back the leader out so that they can actually, it's kind of like if you're with all the people, you can't see really far, but you step back, you see all the people, and then you can see what the horizon looks like and where we're headed from there, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what we're trying to do is to create those conditions to improve rapport among team members so that they learn how to advocate or ask questions when they're uncertain.
Asking, I love people that are curious. I think curiosity
Yeah,
is one of the best leadership traits one could have.
yeah,
And so what you just said kind of highlights what I love seeing in a staff member where let's say they're new and they come on board for a while and they're just doing what they're told for the
yeah,
longest time, but then you're kind of like as a leader you're kind of waiting for them to like, okay, when are they going to take the initiative, when are they going
yeah,
to start, when are they going to start asking the questions, when are they going to start like,
yeah,
like, hey, you're told to wear your seatbelt in the car. When do you ask the question like, why do I have to wear my seatbelt in the car?
right,
Just that next evolution of
yeah,
growth.
yeah,
And I agree with you 100%. Culture, will drive that. Hopefully the leader is curious and that kind of, you pours into the staff. But um, taking initiative. I think that's a big plus for an employee to figure out. Not maybe just having mentors or somebody that can speak into their life. Like, hey, look, you've been there
Hmm.
for a few years. Like, let's take the
Yeah,
next
by
step
that
here.
point, for sure.
um, no, this
Yeah,
so what about constraints as far as like against planning uh pitfalls that you've seen
yeah.
people organizations have when it comes to
Well,
trying to develop.
yeah, the routine of business, right? So losing projects, losing clients, imposed deadlines that sneak up out of places, or all these just once again variables, right? And your concept of resilience is really important there, right? We are trying to prepare a workforce to bounce back quickly, right?
Mm,
And some organizations, some industries, I think, do this probably very well. Um, and they develop their people to bounce back quickly. The military is a great example.
mm,
But others, it's amazing to sometimes see things that are annual timelines, things that occur, and then they come up and they're like in crisis mode all the time, and they're surprised by it. And so there's some conversations to be had as it relates to the overarching planning. But all
mm,
those variables, can be derailers at times, and then you're down a person, right? And whether they're out sick, maybe they're on maternity leave, or you lost a position or a person, and so someone's doubling up. All those things build instability in the system, and it comes back to that fortitude, the leadership, right? You've seen it before where that leader in some instances has to recast that vision so people can rally around it to push through. They have it within them. Um, but there's factors that are influencing that, and
yeah.
trust is one of those.
Yeah, and just the just daily habits as well, like
Yeah,
influencing, supporting what that vision is. Like it's one thing to cast that vision, but to practice, to have habits that are kind of integrated, and just even
yeah,
having conversations on resilience. I mean,
yeah,
that's a big one, just to keep the people charged and engaged. And uh, it's there could be a heavy weight for a leader, to look at it in a way is like, how do I do this? But it starts with, like you said, at the beginning, it starts with what are the
yeah.
needs, what are kind of the requirements and objectives that we're going for here. Um,
Yeah, and I think you're on it when you talk about curiosity, right? There's something that occurs in the body when someone has a growth mindset and they're curious, right? So a new task becomes a challenge and an opportunity as opposed to a death sentence, right? Like it's just two people can interpret it in different ways. And when they
mm,
embody that curiosity, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna have to roll up our sleeves and get this done. I'm not sure how, but we'll figure it out. And it just sounds so different from someone that just might be complaining about it or throwing their supervision under the bus because they don't like the change. So
mm.
you're onto something there.
Yeah, that it can be damaging when you have somebody that's, that has that fixed mindset and they're just
Hmm.
looking for someone to blame, or so I think it kind of gets into a little bit maybe of the locus of control aspects,
Yeah.
some of those intrinsic extrinsic
Yeah.
factors. That's probably a much deeper conversation.
Uh-huh.
Maybe we'll have you back just to speak on that uh
Yeah.
in the future. But now I so one, I thank you for your time on this, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate the engagement of just looking at just how important that culture is and just setting that stage, because that you can't really do anything without that healthy foundation to get
Yeah.
started. So
Yeah.
um so how do we learn, how do listeners, viewers learn more about you? Where I'm gonna have some notes
Okay.
in the script below, but I'll provide all the links. But what do you want people to know about you if they wanted to follow up with you?
If they want to reach out, because we love talking about this, and when I say we, my wife and I created this company, um, and our motto is work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it.
Love it.
And so
Can
reach
you say
out
it
to
one more
us.
time for those in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
back?
yeah. So yeah, work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it, right?
Mm,
My analogy is that I want my people to go home at the end of the day with enough fuel left in their tank so they can be present and engaged with the things that are most important to them in their personal time. Might be
mm,
kids, might be significant other, might be volunteering. It might be finally getting back to the gym. Whatever that is, I
yeah.
don't want you out of gas when you leave work at the end of the day. So
Mm,
you can find me on LinkedIn, um, Rob, R-O-B, or Robert, Robert. Last name's Leon. Like you said, it's spelled like lion, Lion. Find me there. Our company is Black River Performance Management. We have clients all over the world. We travel. We love talking to people. We love keynoting, strategic planning, facilitation. Check us out at Black River, the letter P for performance, the letter M, so blackriverpm.com.
yeah. And I'll make sure that's included in the
Awesome.
discussion points there too. Uh, that so if you wanted somebody, or if an organization wants to have you come out and speak, just get in touch with
Yep.
you and maybe set something
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if they
Yeah.
want to, work through an issue and they're like, can I bounce this idea off you? Yeah, reach out. We do that all the time with people to give them some perspective. I'd rather have people reach out to someone that has some expertise, get some perspective for no cost for 45 minutes, and then have a
Mm.
path forward. And we'll share our models we've built on motivation, performance, and all these different things. We love helping people.
Nice. Nice. All right. Well, hey, thank you, doctor. I appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
thanks,
And
EB.
yeah, I look forward to seeing more from Black River PM in the future and see what you guys get into.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
man.
so much. All right.
All right.
All right, my friends. I told you it was going to be a good one, and it didn't disappoint. I think it was a great conversation. Really good, insightful information to chew on, to think about, to discuss with your teams. And I just wanted to highlight that final point about, what they're about over at Black River PM, and really just thinking about coming home at the end of the day and not drained, not frustrated, not exhausted, and not projecting all of that onto your spouse, your partner, your kids, the people that are in your circle, and really being able to just be you, and be more of you because of what you're doing in your job, and just feeling fulfilled and energized from it. I think that's just a beautiful message to get across. I think that's an important message in this day and age. Something that I think is very accessible if we just focus on it. If we talk about in our communities, in our organizations, some of those concepts that we discussed today. And I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you. We've gone from, a couple weeks ago talking about, faith, personal faith, and the role that it has in resilience, and just that connection to who you are as a person, and the leader's mindset of including that in their thought process, to just how we are including the organizational resilience, making that connection between the employee and the employment. And I think that's just something that we're just going to keep doing here. We're going to keep trying to develop that conversation. We're going to keep trying to push that conversation, and I'm really excited for you to share in this with me. So I appreciate your feedback. Again, don't hesitate to email me at bnbresilience@gmail.com. Your feedback is important. I think it's important just to keep developing this conversation. It's like, I told a friend of mine that I'm building the plane as I'm flying it here. And I know there's a lot of great work that's being done, just as it is over at Black River PM. And I just want to highlight those. I want to sing your song. I want to highlight all the great work that's being done, just building resilience, whether it's personal or in the organizational realm. So, again, thank you so much for tuning in, subscribing, sharing. That's very important for me. So I sincerely do appreciate you doing that. And until next time. EB out.